Today we'll be shooting on the brand new premium vlogging camera from Sony, the Sony ZV E1.
And here it is. And we're out and about walking in Cape Town, creating some content on this camera, even though neither of us are content creators, but we wanted to show you guys what this little beast is capable of. So right now we're going to switch to the Sony ZV E1.
Now this Sony ZV E1 is definitely catering at a more premium vlogging or content creator crowd. So if you want the easy usability of the ZV E10, but you need the performance of the A7S III, this camera is going to tick a lot of boxes.
Indeed, indeed. Now, to illustrate that, we just want to run you guys through some of the headline specs on this unit. In terms of the video, it's very similar to what you had in the A7S III. And in terms of the stills, it's sort of like a bit of a hybrid. Some things from the A7S III, some things from the ZV E10. A very interesting combination is the only way I can put it at this stage. So in terms of that specs, you want to take us away?
Now looking at the sensor of this camera, we believe it's from the A7S III, but we're not 100% sure, but it is a 12 megapixel sensor, just like the S3 as well. Now, it has the Bionz XR processing chip, so you have about 8 times more speed, really fast camera, and it also has a dedicated AI chip. So this is a new technology that was introduced in the R5, which I know you checked out and you love.
Indeed.
The speed and the autofocus out of this camera.
Yeah.
According to Sony, they say they did some tweaking to it, especially on the video side of things in terms of autofocus. They've improved even more on that. So that is really great to see. And testing it out today, the autofocus is insane.
Yeah, look, no complaints in terms of the autofocus. It is absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, it is so good when you're shooting video and even when you're shooting stills. I mean, it performs beautifully. Now, just in terms of those video specs, just to give you a brief overview. So you've got 4K at a maximum frame rate of 60 on this unit. There is speculation at the moment that Sony might do a firmware update that's going to bump it up to 4K 120, but that is sort of unconfirmed at the moment, so I don't want to put my head on a block and say that it's definitely going to come, but it would be very cool if they do that. So you've got 10-bit 422 recording on the camera itself, and also S-Log3 with S-Cinetone, so a lot of those features coming down from your cameras like the A7S III, your FX3, FX30, all of those types of units. Where it does lag behind those cameras ever so slightly is that the encoding rate is going to be a little bit lower. So this unit doesn't have the CF Express Type A card slot. It records straight onto SD, so you're not quite going to get that like high bit, encoding on that unit. So in terms of editing, it might not be as robust as what it is the video footage, at least out of an A7S III or an FX3, but still should be really, really good out of the unit. The other thing that you've got in here is going to be that you do not have a full-size HDMI port. And Sony did state that this unit will not output RAW footage over the HDMI. So that's another little separation from the A7S III. At the same time, though, I do feel like that if you need that type of features, that you will probably look at a camera that's a little bit more serious than this unit.
So the Sony ZV E1 features a lot of cool features that's going to benefit content creators. One of them is the mode we're currently using, which is the brand new dynamic active stabilization. So obviously this is a full frame, we're shooting on a 16mm, and this is cropping, we're kind of guessing like roughly 1.5 or 1.6 times. So sacrificing a little bit of your wide, but getting buttery smooth stabilization. I mean, we just literally walked down these stairs and it's pretty smooth.
Yeah, extremely smooth. In terms of other features that they've added that we really enjoy is, again, using the crop feature on this full frame camera. And it is a weird thing where it sort of like crops in a little bit and it follows you within the frame. So we're showing you what that looks like right now because we can't really demonstrate it live. It's a little bit awkward, but it's kind of cool. It just sort of works. In addition to that, you have the product showcase, which we've seen in some other Sony cameras before. It also does a thing where it automatically crops in and then crops back out again to make it look like you're doing like a dynamic zoom thing within the camera itself. Again, using that full frame crop. We'll show you what that looks like as well. And it's all just sort of really cool features to make filming easier for the average person. If you don't want to dive deep into editing, you don't want to do that whole thing and spend hours and hours in post-production, this is the type of camera that's going to give you that flexibility and give your footage that little bit of an edge that you won't otherwise have, all in camera. And I think that's really cool.
That's a quick brief overview on the brand new features on the ZV E1, but let's head over to the studio quick, review the footage, and also chat about the ergonomics and the changes on this new body. We're back in the studio and we're quickly going to run through some of the ergonomics and the button layout on the brand new ZV E1. Now first up, like you said in the beginning of the video, it's kind of like a mixture of the ZV E10 but with the A7S III performance. So on the body side of things, very similar to the ZV E10.
Indeed, very, very similar. So you literally have the same type of look and feel. The only real difference is it's chunkier, okay? You still have your dedicated dials to record for all your functions, nice and turn dials, on, off switches, all of that kind of thing. Pretty standard and very similar to what we saw on the ZV E10. Then you have a switch over here going through stills mode, video mode, and that reminds me a lot of what we first saw on the FX3, then onto the FX30, where it had that dedicated switch to go between your modes. And I really like that. The other thing that we see over here, pretty standard issue these days, is a fully articulating screen. Obviously touch screen on these cameras now for manipulation. And all in all, very handy. I can't say that I find any fault with this layout. It kind of works for me.
Yeah, so going into other parts, we have the FZ100 battery, quite common with the full frame cameras with Sony these days. It does have a micro HDMI port, so just be aware if you're buying any HDMI cables, it needs to be the micro. It obviously has your headphone in, mic input as well, USB-C, that's pretty standard. And then just be aware, one SD card slot. So from the Pro cameras that have the Type A and SD card slot, this only has the one SD card slot. Also, a great feature to see on this type of camera is the tally lamp, really helpful for your talent to see when you're filming. And then it also has this brand new tri-mic or 3-mic layout that allows you to record in an omnidirectional or very directional forward and even backward. So that's a really cool feature there.
Now we want to take you guys through the shooting experience and what the actual footage is like coming from this camera. Now, we've had it for a few hours, haven't had a ton of time to shoot with it yet, but just as a first impressions, I think it's important just to give you guys an idea of what we think of it. So for me, right off the bat, in terms of the actual quality, it's good. Not really a groundbreaking statement there, because it is, to the best of our knowledge, basically the internals from an A7S III. And so no surprise there, the quality is good. The low light performance is good. You've got sharpness because you have that native 4K resolution coming off that sensor. So it's sharp, it's good. The files are surprisingly robust. My initial thoughts was, so you don't have that recording rate that you get on the CF Express Type A cards like you do in the A7S and the FX3. So maybe you weren't quite going to get that same sort of level of editing dynamic, but it's there. It's perfectly great for the type of area that this camera is aimed at. The colors are good. S-Log3 obviously phenomenal. No two ways around it. We all know that. It works and it looks really, really good.
Yeah, I think Sony is definitely aiming this at a very specific type of client or very specific crowd. Someone that wants pro performance, but someone that wants also a very simplistic body, especially if you look at the body and the button layout. It doesn't look like an entry-level camera, but it has a lot of entry-level buttons and dials. So it makes it very easy and convenient for the shooter. And for someone that wants to focus more on the content, they're not worried about camera settings and all those things. And you can see that when you look at all these extra cool features that Sony is adding, like the frame stabilization, the frame follow mode, the bokeh switch, we can go on. This has 4K 30 live stream via the USB port, sorry. So that's another great feature they've also added in this. So definitely aimed at a more higher end sort of content creation crowd.
Yeah, and I will say that that's kind of where I struggled with this camera initially. So what generally happens on these things is we get sort of like a very kind of hush-hush spec sheet of these cameras, and we look at it and we sort of try and see where it's aimed, you know, because there isn't a lot of information generally around brand new cameras before they hit the market and before there's all the like the media releases and that kind of thing around it. And that simplistic nature of it, coupled with kind of like these high-end features that the camera is capable of, really threw me initially. And I didn't quite understand where it fits in and what it's all about until we started shooting with it. Because damn, it's easy. It's so easy to shoot with this thing and get really good footage out of it. So you were talking about like the easy features. Take that dynamic active stabilization system. So it does a crop in within the frame. So you're going from full frame down to about like a Super 35 type of frame size. On a 12 megapixel sensor, that means that you're losing effectively your 4K recording. And what these cameras generally do is they do some interpolation and add in kind of like pixels and things to try and make it still look like 4K. And generally you can see that it's not great, it's not fantastic. You can kind of see when it happens. On this type of camera, it works really well. You can see from the footage, it's actually quite good. But those sort of features don't really detract from what this camera is aimed at. Yes, you lose a little bit of sharpness, you lose a little bit of quality. Does that matter for your average content creator out there? Sorry, not average, higher end content creator. Does that really matter? My thinking is no. You know, I personally think a camera like this is designed to give a certain level of quality, but give it relatively easily compared to something like an A7S III, an FX3, even an FX30. That's quite complicated, quite difficult to get to grips with, and probably not aimed at a person who just wants to set a camera up quickly, do some shots, you know, like be at an event, be recording, doing like vlogs in the gym or whatever it is. Like this type of thing is so easy to use, and I think for that, Sony nailed it.
So overall, a lot of positives, but we can't end the video with
Without mentioning a couple
we can't end the video without mentioning some negatives. So the biggest for me is going to be no viewfinder. Yeah, we know it's like vlogging and YouTube videos and that kind of thing. You don't need a viewfinder. But the times when we were shooting in very sunny conditions and also doing some photos, having the viewfinder is a nice to have, but not the end of the world for this kind of client. The other thing is the grip. I felt like I've kind of small-ish hands, but I was bumping some buttons here and there, especially this new zoom rocker button. So if you have the PZ lenses from Sony, that is a cool feature, but we were bumping it every now and then.
Yeah.
The other thing was we were shooting in a sort of a sunny kind of day, and we did get an overheat warning, but the camera never shut off. So yeah, there is maybe some overheating testing that we might need to do to give you like the specific times, but yeah, we did get the warning once or twice. And then the last thing was the battery life. Now, yeah, mirrorless cameras chows batteries, especially these big boys that record in high resolution formats. So I mean, it was like about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then we had to change batteries. So again, not a big deal. There's many battery solutions out there for these cameras these days.
So in a nutshell, essentially Sony created a camera that is aimed at a market segment which a few years ago didn't even exist. And even now, still to me, almost seems like it doesn't quite exist, but I really get where they're aiming it and where they're going with this. And it really kind of makes sense for where they're placing this unit within their lineup. So from my point of view, definitely a positive. It's a great little camera. It packs some monster features in there specifically for a video editing crowd. It makes shooting video easier than what it's ever been before, and creating really cool video effects in camera without the need for fancy editing, fancy post-production. Do it all in camera and deliver a basically complete product straight out of the camera. And I think for that, it's just about perfect. They really, really nailed it. And even though initially I didn't quite get what this camera is trying to be, and I think a lot of people out there might feel the same when you look at the spec sheet, because it is so varied and so all over the place. But just do yourself a favor. If you live anywhere near a camera store that's going to be carrying these, just go in and play with it. And I guarantee you, once you have a go with this thing, you will absolutely get what Sony was trying to do here.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this preview of the Sony ZV E1. Go check it out on the Orms Direct website and let us know in the comments below if you might be getting one.
Yeah, and guys, as always, if you enjoyed our content, please consider dropping a like on this video and subscribing to our channel for more content exactly like this. And we'll catch you guys next time. Cheers.